Hello, good evening and welcome to Prime Business. I am Pius Kojobaka. Multidimensional poverty in Ghana has declined marginally from the first quarter of last year from 24.6% to 23.9% in the third quarter of 2025. And that's according to the latest Multidimensional Poverty Index report released by the Ghana Statistical Service. The development should mean that overall assessment of poverty in the country has declined due to improved access to basic services. More in this report.
The reports indicate that the decline reflects improving access to basic services and living conditions for many households. Within a single quarter, more than 360,000 people exited multidimensional poverty between the second and the third quarters of 2025. Overall, about 950,000 persons moved out of poverty between the third quarter of 2024 and the third quarter of 2025.
Multidimensional poverty is declining. We see this from the data. The multi-dimensional poverty incidence reduced from 23.9% in quarter 1 to 21.9% in quarter 3. We've also seen that over 360,000 people actually exited poverty between quarter 2 and quarter 3 of 2025. And if you look at it, if you're looking at it from an annual perspective, we've seen that about 950,000 persons exited poverty between 2024 quarter 3 and 2025 quarter 3.
Despite the progress, regional inequality remains pronounced. The Northeast and the Savannah regions continue to record poverty incidence above 50%, while Greater Accra and the Western region remain below 20%, highlighting persistent geographic disparities.
Second, regional inequality remains. We've seen that, for example, Northeast and the Savannah regions continue to record high poverty incidence, in fact, above 50%, when the national average is just 21.9%. But at the same time, we have regions like Greater Accra and Western that are staying below 20%. So that shows the stark inequality we have in poverty. Third, there's a big rural-urban gap. The gap is about 18 percentage points. Rural poverty is about 31.9% compared to urban poverty, that's about 14.2%. Fourth, two dimensions impact poverty the most, and these dimensions are health and living conditions. Health contribution to poverty is about 41%, whilst living conditions contribution to poverty is about 34%.
The rural-urban gap also remains wide, with poverty incidence in rural areas estimated at 31.9% compared to 14.2% in urban areas, representing an 18 percentage point difference.
Meanwhile, economist Dr. Edu Owusu-Sarkodie is urging the government to enhance its livelihood empowerment against poverty, known as the LEAP program, to further reduce poverty in the country. Now, this comes after Ghana's multidimensional poverty rate dropped marginally to 21.9% for the third quarter of last year. Speaking to Joy Business, Dr. Sarkodie recommended decentralizing LEAP activities, enhancing community involvement, and increasing funding to expand coverage.
Programs like Livelihood Empowerment Against Poverty, LEAP, and also School Feeding Program. And today we have VSHS that feeds our borders. Because, the underlying objective of all the three that I've mentioned is to improve nutrition. And nutrition is one of the indicators. In fact, the statistician mentioned that health, nutrition contributes about how much? 41% of the poverty. So, but it has helped. The LEAP school feeding program, VSHS are helping. I'm sure without these programs, the incidence would have been higher than we see now. But there's more room for improvement, as someone would say. So there's the need to make the LEAP get to the people who need it, right? And don't play politics with it. Also, the VSHS, I think many students and their parents have complained about the nutritional quality of the food. I think we have to improve on that. The school feeding program too, we have to improve on the quality of the food we give them. And generally speaking, nutritional status and also health insurance, because like I said, health insurance it stands out as the most single deprivation of many Ghanaians. So I think it's working all right. Today, about close to 60% of Ghanaians have registered, but still, 40% still are behind, and we have to get them registered.
Now, the Associate Director at Deloitte Ghana, Dennis Brown, is urging the Bank of Ghana to pursue further cuts in the policy rate and instead assess the impact of earlier reductions on credit delivery to the private sector. He argues that policymakers must determine whether the easing cycle is translated into real relief for businesses and stimulating growth in the real economy. He spoke earlier on the marketplace.
Not expecting the Bank of Ghana to, carry out, significant cuts soon, primarily because we've seen that in recent past. I think over the second and third quarters of 2025, what I'm expecting Bank of Ghana to do will be to, hasten to further cuts and rather to assess the impact of what the previous cuts have been. I mean, there's a certain bigger goal that we're aiming to achieve, which is to make credit or capital cheaper, and for that to influence the supply of capital to the private sector, and for private sector to take advantage of that to invest in the real sectors of the economy to, grow the economy. That's the bigger goal. So as we do that, we might pause to assess the impact of that. And if there are other bottlenecks that is not allowing that impact to play out, the Bank of Ghana may have to, look at a different strategy or work with other fiscal institutions to look at, correcting those bottlenecks to allow the pass-through effect as we expected. So I'm not expecting, Bank of Ghana to hasten to do additional big cuts. I'm expecting for them to be slow to that, to assess the impact as we've had so far, and to take a decision from there.
To one big story we are following up for you, Star Oil Limited has announced the immediate suspension of its membership of the Chamber of Oil Marketing Companies, known as COMAC, a decision that has intensified tensions within Ghana's downstream petroleum sector and sparked concerns about the unity within the industry body. More in this report.
The company expressed concern that its position has not been fairly acknowledged or accurately communicated, particularly during recent media engagement by the Chamber's chief executive. According to Star Oil, this has contributed to negative public perceptions, creating the impression that its stance is driven by anti-competitive or improper motives. The company describes such suggestions as unfair and damaging to its reputation, given its long history and contributions to the industry. Star Oil reiterated that its position to the price floor is based on economic and market principles, arguing that the policy distorts pricing by delaying transmission of international floor prices and foreign exchange movement into the local market. It said this weakens competition and ultimately disadvantages consumers, noting that similar reasoning informed the earlier removal of the price floor for bulk distribution companies. Star Oil said it believes that continued membership of COMAC under the current circumstances poses reputational risks without providing a fair platform for its views to be represented.
Let's get more reactions on this and get to Zoom, phone I should say, and speak with the Executive Secretary of COPEC, Duncan Amoah. Duncan, thank you so much for joining us here on Prime Business. And interestingly, the pullout by Star Oil is coming just a few hours into that crucial meeting tomorrow between COMAC and other stakeholders to discuss the way forward on the price floor policy. Now, how will this affect tomorrow's meeting, considering Star Oil's influence in the market?
Pius, I sincerely would have wished that we didn't get here. I sincerely would have wished that Star Oil had stayed just a little longer. But if you go through, of course, their communique, you also get the understanding that they only raise a concern of a policy that they think, if tweaked, would further strengthen the industry. A concern that, Pius, we had discussed 2-3 years ago when the policy of floor pricing came up with the NPA. And so they were simply rehashing the very thing that CSOs and other members of the industry had reiterated. Don't forget, the same pricing floor policy was rejected by the BDCs. That was heeded to. But at the time, because COMAC wasn't firm on its stance, that they do not also want re-regulation of prices when you have entered a pure price deregulation program. The BDCs were able to get, the NPA to stay off, right? So if you have one of the larger members of COMAC raising an issue, I think that maybe COMAC should have abstained. Maybe COMAC should have acted as a referee also and allowed some of us to probably discuss the matter and see the pros and cons thereon. Unfortunately, it was as though COMAC had already taken a decision or a stand on a position that one of your key members was quite certain if it was tweaked would lead to larger benefits. I think that, I don't know, but things could have been done differently, except to say that they haven't said anything new. Star Oil has not been anti-consumer. And so we are tempted to go with their position because at the end of the day, if their position is held, it leads to larger benefits to the petroleum consumer across the country. So I don't see why they have been victimized on this instance. If you look at the kind of discussions that we have had so far, bearing in mind that you are dealing with the largest player as far as the downstream volumes are concerned. So maybe, but I would still continue to appeal to Star to reconsider because you cannot have a chamber or a body of like-minded business, units where the largest of the players is actually out of any discussion or decision. So we'll continue to appeal and see maybe that position will be reconsidered to see that COMAC is even stronger because it's one of the bodies that we need. You cannot do much with petroleum issues in the country without COMAC's input. So we did start in there, except to say that that position on removing of the price floor is a position shared by millions of Ghanaians because at the end of the day, you cannot have a floor where for stealing you don't care, for those who sell much higher prices you don't care, but those who say that if you took off the floor within a window, if the city does so well as we've seen in recent times, they can even go down further. You rather get those ones rather victimized and made to sound as though they are anti-competition. And that format, for me, didn't just sit well. I'm not surprised what has happened, but again, we'll continue to plead that Star should go back to COMAC. Together, they are stronger.
And Duncan, we've got to make way and, of course, come out with a roadmap on that. But really, can COMAC go ahead with the meeting without Star Oil's representation, bearing in mind what they bring to the table?
Clearly, whatever decision COMAC makes tomorrow, or whatever decision they make without input from Star, you and I can already tell where their decision would most likely lie, because it is that disagreement or it is that discontent from what their position has been that is leading Star Oil to want to pull out. And so it would have been only fair to have their input further. It would have only been fair to have them at the table so that their suggestions or concerns, which probably is shared by other oil marketing companies, could be forcefully articulated. But now that there's a pull-out, you wonder what kind of decisions that you and I should be expecting from a meeting tomorrow, because one would have needed their forceful input in there so that if they came to a decision, you could say that, well, maybe it reflects everybody or it reflects the larger grouping. But now that the largest of them is out due to concerns on how the same issue that is raised has been handled, you and I will be wondering what kind of outcome to expect from tomorrow. But we'll wait and see. Maybe this would even make some of them reconsider the need to also appreciate where Star Oil is coming from. Because clearly, like I've indicated, you cannot continue to insist that people should not sell below a certain threshold, but they can sell at any upper threshold that they decide to set. So there's no price ceiling, but there's a floor. Are you just stopping the other companies that would want to behave like Star Oil in the near future, bearing in mind that Star Oil wasn't the most dominant player some 4, 5, 6, 10 years ago. It was one of the minor players who decided that, of course, Ghanaians are price sensitive. They would want to go with, the Ghanaian, even post-COVID, to ensure that whatever savings that they get, they will pass it to the Ghanaian. So if they come up with such a position, I think that all of us should listen. The NPA should not sit on the fence and be recalcitrant and think that, of course, we are clothed with power, so we'll do whatever we want. They can do whatever they want, but clearly, the Ghanaian is not the better off so long as you continue to apply this price floor thing with the excuse that if you allow it, people will bring in bad products. People are bringing in bad products even with the price floor. So what exactly are you protecting? If you want to stop the bad products, you know where to find them, and I think they do know. They should go find them and leave the legitimate players who are trading legitimately, whose taxes are recorded, day in, day out, whose profit and loss accounts are published day in, day out. You should be able to have any normal audits with them if you desire. But to say that don't sell below a price I set at the NPA, when the NPA is not the one buying the product for them, I think that really, like the BDCs did earlier, it's just not right. If the BDCs could get you to, refrain, and you think that the OMCs, of course, you can probably bully them or push anybody or somebody else can sit somewhere and say that, oh, for us, give us a floor so that other members who are probably able to sell cheaper or more efficiently, we should not allow them because they will collapse the market. The BDCs are not collapsing the markets with a floor.
All right, Duncan, thank you very much for making time to speak to us here on Prime Business. And of course, we shall be following up on that meeting and bring you more in our subsequent bulletins. But that's how we part company here on Prime Business. I am Pius Kojobaka. For more stories, do log on to myjoyonline.com/business. Prime Sports is next.